All right, so welcome to another episode of our program called Global Perspectives. The intention of this program is just to bring to you educators that are all around the world so that you can hear what their lived experience is in terms of their international working, the time that they have spent working internationally. So, what we're doing today is that we're going to bring to you three experienced educators which have worked across the globe, but importantly, they are from a Jamaican background. And so they're going to share their own personal journey as they traverse the world, working both in this case internationally, working internationally and also working abroad. Now, last week we had a discussion, and what came out of that was that there clearly was a difference. So this week's panel are actually an esteemed group. This group of people, they have worked internationally and they have also worked abroad. And we hope that by the end of this program, those people, they'll be able to give you a better understanding of what those experiences are like. And so you can make the decision, perhaps where you want to go, or maybe just feeling better informed. Without further ado, I want to bring our guests today. It's a panel discussion. First of all, I'm going to bring to you someone who a wonderful personality, someone with a very big smile. I've known her from her time at the University of the West Indies. She's an educator, and she works in one of those places that you'd never expect, perhaps based on what the media says she would be working. I won't give away her story, but I'm just going to welcome to join us today. We have Michelle Smith. Michelle, just say hi to our audience.
Hi. Hi, thanks for having me, Miguel.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Michelle, for just joining us. And Michelle, you want to tell us a little bit about where you are currently working and just a little bit about you as well?
I'm currently in Saudi Arabia. Most people go, what? Why would you go there? But I'm currently in Saudi Arabia, 23 years of teaching. I started in Jamaica, in Mandeville, Little Mandeville, a proud churchite, Church Teachers College, I must say it. And moved on to Kingston, where I went to UWI. Still taught in Kingston as well for many years. And then finally moved abroad, which is the first part of this. So moving to England, was moving abroad. Worked in inner city, London, which is very, very different to the Jamaican experience. You know, coming from the experience where you're able to have more of a, be able to talk to the students on a more down-to-earth way back home, and then having to transition in the UK to speaking, having to learn new strategies, how to deal with students with really severe behavioral issues. And then moving from there, I came to Saudi Arabia first in 2014 to 2015, where I lectured at university here, which was a lovely experience. I went back to the UK for career reasons, and then have moved back here to Saudi Arabia since August 2019, which has been an amazing experience for me.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. And I'm sure as we begin to talk about what that experience is like, you'll be able to share some nuggets for anyone who wants to understand exactly what it's like to live as a woman in Saudi Arabia. We'll find out more about that.
Definitely.
Now, thank you. Now, our next guest, again, is another churchite. I think I'm beginning to wonder what's happening at Church Teachers College, but for some reason, everyone, as soon as they finish their education in church, they pack and they go overseas. He's a friend, he's a math teacher, someone I've known as well from the University of the West Indies, and he has been traveling the world as well. So without further ado, I want to introduce to the audience, William Fullerton. William.
Good evening, Dr. Barker, and my esteemed colleague, Michelle. It's indeed a pleasure. I haven't seen you in a while. Yes, it's a pleasure to be on this platform to discuss with my friends what it is like to be here. As you know, many of the people who know me knows that I'm a confused fellow. I am from both Manchester and Clarendon. As I was born in Clarendon, and I spent some time in Manchester. And then I moved on. I attended Church Teachers College as one of the the noble institution on the hill there in Manchester. And then I moved on to work at Homewood Technical High School for some 9 years as a teacher of mathematics. A lovely experience there. And after which I traveled abroad to live and work abroad. And I spent 7 years working in the UK. And then I think at that time, my true learning from Church Teachers College came into being, especially in the classroom management area. I've spent some time there, and now I am here in Muscat, Oman, as a teacher of mathematics.
Thank you, William. It's great to have you on the show as well, William. So we'll certainly unpick that journey as well, which is certainly different from the one that Michelle took. So our final panelist, the final person that will join us today, is another very, very good friend. And you may wonder, I'm just bringing people that I know, and then we just talk about what we all learn. And just before we even bring my next guest on, it's just to understand the reason why this show is being put together. It's simply because someone asked me, what is it like to work internationally? And my first move was trying to answer that question myself. And then I realized it's maybe best to find out from people, because my view is certainly different from everyone else's. And you'll see that as the show unfolds. And without further ado, I want to bring another experienced educator, similar background, from Jamaica, went to the UK, and is now here. So I'll just bring on screen, very good friend of mine, Mr. Lennox Christie. Lennox, welcome.
Greetings, Dr. Barker. Greetings to everyone. Michelle, William, good to see you all. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on this platform, sharing our experiences, and it's good to be on this panel to add balance to all the churchites that are here.
Don't be left out.
Yeah. Now, it's still a bit uneven because even with two of them, they still can't balance with the Myconian, but we will keep the change. I studied at the Michael and started my teaching journey in 1995 in cool Mandeville. And incidentally, I started working, my day job was teaching at the Carteret College in Mandeville, and in the nights I used to teach some classes at Church Teachers College in the evening college, and that is where I met Michelle and Mr. Fullerton as well. So that was a really good experience for me. From there, I started working at Gavin Massio in Clarendon. That was a very memorable year and a half for me. And in total, I taught in Jamaica for 5 years before I migrated to the UK, and did the better part of 15 years teaching there. And that is when you start to really grow in terms of the skills that you develop as an educator in the UK, because you have to apply a lot of different strategies and dealing with a whole range of skills and behavioral challenges. Since then, I've migrated to the Middle East, specifically the UAE in Abu Dhabi, where I've been for the last 6 years as a head of science in a government school.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you, Lennox. Thank you for sharing that. And as you can see, a lot of us, our journeys are quite different. I just want to reach out now to our audience that might be joining us for now. Just remember that you can always participate in this discussion, either through the Facebook page or through the YouTube link that is floating around. Whichever way you choose to. If you send comments, if the questions are shared with us, then what's going to happen is that we're going to ask our panel to respond to those questions as they come in. So yeah, so just remember that this is really an opportunity to participate in this. So I really want to thank our guests who volunteered to come along and be part of this. Now, just getting right into it. Now, as I said, this is really the follow-up to a conversation, an answer to a question that was posed to me. And so for me, I myself want to find out this answer. And that's why you guys are present here today. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the first question out. And the question is a very simple one. I want you to describe your first day of landing in the UK. As a teacher, you got your job, you know you're going to the UK to work, and you landed in the UK. And I really want you to just give us a quick synopsis, like what happened day one. You got on maybe Heathrow or Gatwick, and just a quick synopsis, what that was like. And I think if you were, you'll see where I'm going with this. So who want to go first?
Let me take it on first. Yeah. I remember reaching the UK on the 29th of August. And to be honest with you, when I landed at 8:30 in the morning, and I was meant to be in a seminar at from 8 o'clock that same morning. I then traveled to a friend's home in London, yes, and then had to be, he took me from the airport to his house and then placed me on the underground with a map and give me instructions as how to get to where I am going and how to return to the to return home. And that was it really. I didn't know where I'm going to sleep that night. I know nothing about it apart from going there, dropping my bag, going home. I knew I was going to stay by his place. But the next day, I had to travel from London, to Berkshire for 7 o'clock in the morning to start a workshop. Yes, I don't know where I'm going. Yes, and that was the whole thing. I didn't have anybody to take me around. They just say, "Bop, here, map, train station, everything," and just send you off, and you have to go and figure it out. Yes.
Thank you, William. Anyone want to add anything to that? That sounds interesting.
Well, my experience was quite different because I was a bit luckier. I had my best friend living in the UK at the time. You two know her, Zandre. And she picked me up at the airport. We got on the Gatwick Express? The Gatwick Express, got into London. Now I was totally confused because no train in Jamaica. The underground is massive. You don't know where to turn. You're panicking because you're like, I don't want to lose the person I'm with, you know. She dropped me off at my sister's house. So my sister lived in the UK, so that was a lot easier for me. And that's where I stayed. But I got lost the next day trying to get to the conference for the agency that I came up with. And I went to the end of I think it was the Bakerloo line. I went all the way to the end. I got on the Hammersmith and City and I changed and got onto the Bakerloo line. Now, I stopped at the wrong stop. It went all the way to the end and I had to come back. I had to be asking everybody. I got to the station and I was almost in tears because I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to get lost in London. I don't know what's happening. And got to where we were staying and we were put up for 3 days in a bed and breakfast because we had to do the seminar there. And I think one of the things I can say is if you do get through with an agency, a lot of the agencies are very helpful. You know, some of the agencies are very helpful. And if you know someone who knows of a good agency, go through that person because my agency put me up, you know, for the 3 nights I was there. And then someone gave me instructions on how to get back to where I was going. So I had somebody who didn't have anywhere to stay. And I asked the person I was staying with, can she stay in the extra room? And so we became roommates flatmates for over a year.
So thank you, Michelle. Christy, what's your day? What's your
my experience was very, very different because I just went to have a look at London in the summer before I actually went there. And My partner at the time was living in London, and I was on my summer holidays in the States, and she said, you have to come and see London Carnival. And I went, saw a bit of London, liked it, because at that time I was in a bit of a dilemma. Was I going to go to the States where most of my family is? And when I say most of my family, I'm the youngest of 15, and the majority are in the States. So, or I'd go to the UK, where I have only one. At that time, I had only one family member that I knew of, and my partner, and she didn't want to move, so I ended up moving there like a year after. And by the time I got there, I literally knew the place and was quite settled before my first day on the job anyway.
Okay.
Thank you. So our first days were pretty much days that you had to figure out yourself. Apart, even Michelle had to find a friend, someone who was available to help. All right, so can I contrast that then? Because I think this is the way I want to take this story a little bit. So then you moved to work internationally, right? Yeah. So I wonder if you could provide a similar kind of background to what your first day working internationally was like. You stepped off the plane. Who want to go first?
Well, let me continue the trend then. When I came off the airplane, the only thing that I knew that was different was the heat. Yes, the heat. There was a blanket of heat that hit me. I could not breathe properly. But before I got to that stage, the school that employed me, they gave you as much instructions and information as possible as guidance. Even could draw out a map of what the immigration section is like and where you should go. Yes, and the signs are there, and you go and pick your visa up, and then you go through with your family, look for the family line because you've got children and it. And when I stepped out, yes, of the airplane, of the airport going through, there was someone there waiting for me. Someone walked up to me and says, William. And when I looked, it was a PRO. Yes. Later on, Miguel was a little later, further down that I saw. And they put me, there was a transportation there for me to take me to a flat that I was there ready and waiting for me. Yes. And my first day of work, they sent transportation to get me at my flat to take me to school. Yes. So there was everything was what was laid on the platter for me. As a matter of fact, the following day they took me to the supermarket. Yes, to shop for anything that was not in the apartment. When I woke up the morning, there was breakfast in the refrigerator, breakfast item in the refrigerator for me and my family. So it was completely different. There was nothing I had to worry about on the international scene compared to when I was, and I actually left the UK to come here early because I wanted to adjust. I wanted time to adjust. After experiencing that, I wanted that time to adjust. But there was no need to, because I was taken care of on the international scene.
Well, I'll follow the trend. I'll go next. For me, it was a really, really amazing experience arriving into Saudi Arabia. We got into the airport. It was very straightforward. The only thing I worried about my very first time coming was, oh dear, I don't have an abaya. So I had to get an abaya from a friend who had been in the Middle. Her sister had actually been in the Middle East, and she gave me an abaya. And I was panicking because I didn't know what it would be like as a female coming into Saudi Arabia. Would I be harassed? You know, the only thing I noticed that no one looked at me because my face wasn't covered and my head wasn't covered. You know, the men would look down as I approached them. Even at the immigration, the gentleman had his head down the entire time and would look up at me, you know, at the top of his eyes. And then I later recognized it was just culture, and I didn't feel badly after that. Then when I got downstairs, I got my bags. Everything was there. And I had somebody who actually came who carried my bags. I didn't have to carry bags. I didn't have to lift anything off the trolley, nothing. When I arrived, my name was on the paper along with my son's name. And big smile, welcoming me to Saudi Arabia, and hoping I'll have a lovely time. And it was a wonderful conversation. Got to the house, and it was a nice large house. I didn't expect that. I expected to be probably in a 2-bedroom, but it was a massive house. The accommodation was fully furnished, and I think I was a bit surprised. The refrigerator was full of food, fruits. And I was like, whoa, I don't have to go shopping. So I didn't have to go shopping for a week, but they did take us out immediately because I got there in the morning, and they said, would you like to go shopping? There's a shopping bus. And we went to the famous Lulu's to go shopping for fruits and veg. And I was pleasantly surprised, and everybody was really caring and helpful. And upon arriving, I was given an envelope with money to buy groceries. So it was a really good experience. You know, I was given cash in hand as I arrived. Here's your money for setting yourself up, which I really didn't need because everything was already there. So it was a really pleasant experience.
Thank you, Michelle. And we'll continue the trend. It's easy for me to know who's next.
It's based on hype.
Yeah, from my experience, I had some good friends, including Miguel, who did the trek like earlier. So I spent like the year leading up, getting all the information that I could. When I flew over with my wife and young son. It was like he got his passport like the day before we traveled. Yeah, because he was like 3 months old. And we landed, it was like 5-star the moment we landed. There was someone there with my name on a card. Everything collected. We were taken through, we didn't have to join a line at all. We were taken to a 5-star hotel. We had training and paperwork sorting for about a week, and acclimatization before they would move us on to wherever our accommodations would be. And the interesting thing about that accommodation is that they gave us full furniture allowance at the time. And when I was leaving the UK, I had to make a decision what I was going to do with my furniture. In my home, which was going to be rented. So what I did, I researched shipping and realized that the cost of shipping is the same as the furniture allowance that I would be getting. So I shipped all my furniture here, so I didn't have to buy anything. And settling was very easy because I had a lot of good friends on the ground who had done everything that I would have needed to do. And we shared the experience, shared the knowledge, and there was a lot of support all around.
Okay, so thank you for that. So the first piece of like a slight difference between the two is really day one, what that was like. Can I throw another question in there? Like, has anyone thought about why the treatment was different turning up at the UK, and why was that different turning up in an international expatriate worker? Michelle, you want to go first on that?
I think it might be a cultural thing, you know. In the Middle East, I've noticed they're very service-oriented culture, and they believe in treating you well they believe in you arriving and feeling happy and feeling comfortable because you're out of your element. And they come in and they actually want you to stay. So the treatment at the very beginning, even throughout, is usually top notch. And if you look, let's look at just their tourism. Let's look at their hotels. Let's look at, you walk into the malls here, and you can see a massive difference with the way in which they treat, their infrastructure, the way in which they treat their buildings, and then you look at the UK. In the UK, however, you arrive on a work permit, and it is expected that you just get on with it. That is the culture in the UK. Get on with it, and it was a baptism of fire for a lot of us moving to the UK. But I think it's more of a cultural thing. Why it's so different? That's my perspective. That it was more cultural than anything. Even though now, because of the need.
Anyone want to jump in on that?
I was going to agree that there's a cultural component involved, because there is so many misconceptions about living and working in the Middle East, and they want to put all of those to bed the moment you arrive. Plus, service here is top notch, but there's a slight difference, and I think Miguel was slightly hinting on the question when he said as an expatriate compared to being, like, when I moved to the UK, I moved as an immigrant, and
Yes.
And how you're treated for the two is miles apart. As an expat living in the Middle East, you're given 5-star wherever you go. As an immigrant in the UK, you're faced with a lot of the issues that have been embedded in UK society over the years, and nothing is given to you. Everything is expected of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're expected to walk into a classroom knowing exactly what to do from day one. Here, they'll give you a bit of time to settle down, learn the culture, learn the processes, and it's more laid back. It's kind of almost it's a different type of laid back to Jamaica, but it's a lot more laid back here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just let me touch a small part on that. Yes, because of it's UK. UK has this first world mentality, as you say, when we come as an immigrant, to say we're coming to take something. Yes, whereas the international scene, they see you as someone who is coming to help them to develop and lift the country and build the society, and so they treat you as such. So yes, it's a service society in which they offer their services, and they want a good impression of their country and their region to be expressed, but they also it's ingrained in them to treat you well. Unlike the UK, it's just there, you're on your own, and you've got to make it on your own. There's nothing there for you to. Anything you get is you've got to grab it for yourself.
Yes.
I have a little story, because I picked up a sniffle like as soon as I moved into my new apartment. And I went to the doctor, which was in a mall that was literally attached to the complex. So that's one of the things you get accustomed to here, the ease to which you can access facilities. But the pharmacy, I had to go to another pharmacy, which was a little distance away, and I forgot my wallet at the doctor. This was like my first month in the country, my first time going to that pharmacy. I gave them the prescription, they gave me the item, my time to give them the money. Reach for my wallet, no wallet. They say, okay, mister, next time you come, you pay. Next time you pay.
Yes.
That's how they are.
Yes.
And I collected my item, went back home, got my wallet, drove back down there and paid them. But I can't think of many more regions in the world where you'd get that type of service. or that type of trust.
And I mean, I have walked away from the mall and left my phone on a table. I've been eating. I left the phone. I got in the bus, went away to the compound, realized that I had no phone, and started to panic. Because you think if you leave your phone in the UK or in Jamaica on the thing, you're like, you don't expect to get it back. I went there. I went to the security. The security said, "Oh yes, somebody brought the phone to us, and it's here." And I was actually flabbergasted. I was like, "Really? Somebody actually left?" I mean, I went back because I just thought, "All right, let me go and check." But a very trusting society as well. You know, the comfort level I have here is way above what I'd have living in the UK. Where safety is concerned as well.
Yeah.
I had a similar experience.
Yeah, you have a story, yes.
In which I left my wallet in a restaurant and I went to my car with my family and they ran after me.
Yes.
To give me my wallet and my phone. And all that happened is that I went to pay the bill and just left it on the counter and walked back to the table and then left out of left the restaurant. And they ran after me with my wallet and my phone. So I understand exactly what it is. It's a very, very trusting society. I have one more experience in which I went to the mall to add credit to my mobile. And this was new to me, using that kiosk to do it. And I inputted one digit wrong because my phone number was new to me and everything. And it went to another person's phone. And I went inside out of curiosity to speak with them and say, "Hey, this is what happened to me." And he says, "What's the number?" And they called the number and told the person that someone had just by accident topped up 10 reals on your phone. Could you transfer it back to this number? And they within an hour, less than an hour, I got back my credit on my phone.
Yeah.
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 And that was my error. That was my error.
No,
Yeah.
all of this is not to knock the UK, you know, we're not.
No, we're coming to that.
Yeah.
No, we're not knocking the UK, but I just wanted to for anyone who is just joining us, just so they have an understanding of what's going on here. We're literally just having a discussion about what it's like to teach internationally or teaching abroad, and we're trying to make that distinction, but we're also analyzing why some of the things that we see as you work internationally, why they might be different, and also see the things which are similar. At the moment, our guests, Michelle Smith is currently in this studio, but is based in Saudi Arabia. We have William, who is in Muscat, Oman, and we have Lennox, who is in UAE, Abu Dhabi in UAE. So technically, we have 3 Jamaican educated, Jamaican trained teachers, and we're all coming in from different parts of the world. And as Lennox said, we're not knocking anything. We're just trying to understand things. And so the idea is that if you're tuning in, this is what's really happening. If you have questions that you want to ask, just put them in, and I'll throw those questions to the panelists as we move on. So we talked already a little bit about what day one was like as you landed in the country. I'm still keeping day one as the focus, but now I'm going to shift the focus onto education. And I want you to try and recall what day one was like when you met your students for the first time in the UK.
Oh Lord. William, you're gonna start?
Yes, I can start.
If you can, I really want to ask if you remember that day. For me, who has that similar experience, that day one has always remained with me. And so I want to know if people had a similar day one experience. You walked in, lessons, day one for lessons, you're meeting your kids for the first time.
Good.
Who want to go first?
I was of the opinion that it was the same thing that I experienced in Jamaica, having my students in the classroom. They would be very receptive, join the class, have a seat, and wait for the teacher to start. Good? So I stand at the door and I greeted and welcomed everybody in and introduced myself to them. And I notice while I'm talking, and it's as if I'm not talking to anybody. Nobody's paying me any attention. Yes? So after that, I move on to delivering the lesson. And believe me, I had an experience that I've never had before. Students just got up and walk out of the classroom. And it was something that I never experienced in my life, to see as a teacher having a control of my classroom. I recognize that these students totally disregard my presence there. And it was because of Miguel, for one, who had been in the UK, who I called afterwards to find out, how do I cope with this? And then I learned I have to stand at the door to deliver my lesson to my grade 11 students, yes, in order to have them in the classroom, yes. And I can tell you a story about that continuing, yes, but I will give others a chance to express what their first day is like, because that first day, I went to the staff room and my hand was in my head. How do I deal with this? Yes, because you have total control, and now you notice that your control in the classroom has been eroded. Yes, so 9 years of teaching in Jamaica and seeing this, and then my first day, I'm like, you're totally out of control. You have nothing to do. You can't control it, and you can't shout at them. It makes no sense.
My first day was a bit of a shock. I'm a PE teacher, so you can imagine, in an uncontrolled area, kids thinking, and I think what they'd had supply teachers before, that had quite a few teachers come and run away before, and they came in, half of them were half changed, who didn't have trainers, who was in there, and the language, screaming on top of their voices. This was year 9 girls. My very first class was year 9 girls. And at year 9, that's when they start to, the hormones kicking, and they're beginning to decide who is head of the groups, and, they become very competitive among themselves. And so they see you as a female as a threat, and they decided that they were going to voice their opinion. And obviously I was fresh off the boat with the deepest Jamaican accent you can imagine. And a girl looked at me and told me that I must go back on my banana boat back to Jamaica. That was the first day. Wow. We can't understand you. You need to go back on the banana boat back to Jamaica. And I said, no, the banana boat, leave the dock. I can't catch it. And everybody burst out laughing. So I found out on that day that being funny and giving a little joke here and there got them to relax, and, played a few games with them. We're doing basketball. So all the basketballs are being thrown at each other until I took away all the balls. We had one ball for the entire lesson. So, yes. So I learned strategies from day one. It was stressful, I must say, but I learned strategies from day one, and it was an extremely enlightening experience, put it that way.
Yeah, my first day wasn't as traumatic, probably because by the time I started working, I was in the country for about 2.5 months, sorting my paperwork, etc. And I got a supply teacher's job, and I was covering a year 9 science class. And as soon as I got to the class, we got a note that we should be taking the class. All year 9 students are meant to go to the hall for an assembly. And the class next door did not have a teacher. So coming from it's 2 twos, I decided that I'm going to take charge. I lined up both classes, took them down to the hall. The head of year started to look around to say, how did this class get here? Who lined them up, and so on. They couldn't believe that happened. Mm-hmm. But I just took the initiative because that's what I would have done in Jamaica. and my Jamaican accent, as a matter of fact, worked as a huge advantage, massive advantage. It gave me a lot of street cred with the more challenging kids. They automatically respected me. One girl who gave a lot of problems came up to me and said, "So are you our new science teacher?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Oh, the last one had a nervous breakdown." And then she said, "Oh, you sound a lot like my dad." And that was it. No problems from her. And my ability to think on my feet, crack a few jokes, tell a few stories, and I use my knowledge of music as well to massively to calm them down within the first days. And that's how I coped. But I didn't really have any problems.
Yeah.
I want to add to what Lennox is saying. Being a Jamaican in the UK, especially in London, is a massive advantage as a Jamaican teacher. The kids, as you say, the whole street cred thing, they respect you because, especially in, for example, North London, where there are lots of children who are of Jamaican background, they say, "Oh, you remind me of my mother," or "You remind me of my grandma." Hopefully I didn't look old, but "You remind me of your grandma, my grandma. You sound like my grandma." And it was something that you could actually use as leverage to get the children on side. So I do agree with you, Christy. It was it's a massive advantage, especially if you sound Jamaican.
Sorry, you're gonna come in, William. Go.
Yeah, yes, I was in Berkshire, into a school that was in special on what they call notice to improve. They were given notice to improve, and so they had teachers who had left, and I think at the time it was 13 Jamaicans who came to the school at the same time. So that tells you that no local teacher wanted to be in there. And you talk about strategies to use. I developed a strategy in which I asked because these were grade 11 students. They were somewhat bigger than you, and they've developed to being this type of way. I didn't have the problems with the grade 10s and lower, but the grade 11s were challenging. And I had to ask my SLT members to come to that class and visit that class at intervals until I had total control over that class. But it took time after they recognized that they can't drive you away. Yes, it was a stressful time, but after they recognized that you have become a part of the fixtures and the furniture in the institution, they started treating you differently. And that was the whole thing about it. And I'm telling you, what I learned at Church Teachers College about classroom management, woo! I tell you, if I wasn't paying attention in class, I would fail that one completely. That course, I learned that course in the UK in my first year.
And I think, sorry.
Just a quick one here.
Carry on.
1 minute, Michelle. When you spoke about the way they treat teachers when they know that you're going to stick around.
Yeah.
I found that contrast as well when I got to the UK, where it was so different to Jamaica. When a new teacher, when I did my teaching practice in Jamaica, the students treat me like kings, because these teachers, they don't go anywhere. They join a school and then they retire. They don't just jump from school to school to school in Jamaica. So when a new teacher comes to teach them, they were so excited to see a new face. Like I had crowds outside of my lab when I was teaching chemistry. In the UK, you went there, you had to earn your stripes because the turnover was a little bit higher, because people, it was part to do with the nature of the schools and part to do with the culture of getting a promotion by getting a job in another school. You want to move up, you get a promotion easier by joining another school than within the school that you are. So a lot of teachers use, for example, I was teaching maths at a school for 5 years, and by the third year, I was the longest serving maths teacher. But it's not a knock on the school. It's kind of to do with the culture where some people were there and they got promotions and get leading roles in other schools.
There's something that William said about asking senior SLT to come and help. When we think of this from the Jamaican perspective, as from the Caribbean probably, we're unwilling to ask for help. Mm-hmm. Yes. And so sometimes when we arrive overseas, we want to push forward and we have to stand our ground and we have to, keep pushing until we are burnt out, and not understanding that asking for help is a good thing. Back home, you don't ask for help because shame on you. Why would you ask for help? What kind of teacher are you?
You'll be considered to be a weak teacher.
You're weak, How can you be a teacher and be asking for help? Isn't it your class? But this is something that I would say to anybody who decides to move overseas: ask for the help. People are there. That is why systems are in place to help you. That's why you have a head of department. That's why a lot of schools now are doing buddying. So we buddy up. You ask your buddy for that help, someone who can help you make that transition into the system in the UK. And it's really important. Ask for the help.
Yeah. I just wanted to throw in a little piece to this, because one of the things that we can do when we think about the UK is that we want to create this idea that there's one type of school and there's one type of experience. And it's very important that there are so many different types of school. And if you land in the right school, your experience is different from someone who land in a different type of school. And so at all times in this conversation, I think it's important that people who are watching get the idea that we're talking about our personal experiences and we're not speaking generally about what it's like. I certainly worked in a comprehensive school in the UK and our state school, and you would find that the spectrum for state schools go from selective state schools all the way to schools that nobody would ever choose. And so in some ways it's always that kind of thing. So my experience is echoed by you all, but someone here, one of our Facebook audience members, said, I may be one of the lucky ones to have been supported at every school that I've been taught in the UK. My current school, my first job was a school in rural Norfolk, made permanent after a few months, spent 5 years plus in the school. My second school, exceptional support. I know of the experience of others that have been great. And that's exactly what I mean when I say, when we're sharing our experience, people must always understand that we're not speaking generally, we're just sharing. But certainly, in my time, I've met many people who have had more experiences that match my day one, which was kids pushing me out of the way to do whatever they wanted to do. I wanted to ask a question that someone mentioned a little bit of. And my question is around the idea of, you were trained in Jamaica, and at the moment you are currently, could say you worked in 3 different countries. I wonder, to what extent would you say that your training in Jamaica has prepared you to be able to work both abroad, if we use the UK for that example, and then to go on and work as an expatriate? To what extent has that training been helpful to you? Who want to take that one? Michelle.
Go ahead, Michelle.
All right. Moving to the UK as a PE teacher, the experience for me is that, specific to my training, we have to be rounded. What I found when we moved to the UK was that teachers were specialists in a specific area, and that's all they knew. And then they kind of flounder around with the other subjects. But what they were good at was pedagogy. Pedagogy is a big thing for us as well back in Jamaica. But our content area is excellent. So, and we're able to teach across, in PE in particular, as I can speak to, we could teach across the spectrum. So basketball, volleyball, everything, and be able to teach it to a really good level. It prepared me for moving into schools where they could not afford to have specialists for each sport or for coaching, for example. So I was able to then move into that and fill the gap and not feel out of place in the UK. It really prepared me for moving there, where that was concerned. Pedagogically as well, especially looking at behavior management, looking at we call it differentiation now, but back then, you were taught how to deal with students from different abilities, teaching students who come across from Eastern Europe who had no English, for example, and you had to teach reading using your content, which was a big thing for us when we were doing our teachers college training, was teaching reading in the content area, which also helped you to put this into practice in your classroom. So moving to the UK, I believe I was prepared to work with students who are low, middle, high ability and be able to, deal with it well.
Yeah. Lennox, you want to go or should I?
I can go. I think my training at the Jamaica helped a lot, it prepared me and my experience in Jamaica, because I left Jamaica as a science teacher and I started working. I also taught a bit of maths in Jamaica, and I went and did the same in the UK. So in terms of content, in terms of strategies, a lot of it was the same. What was different in the UK was the aspect of culture and language came into it a lot more. Culture in terms of, while I'm new to that country, while I'm understanding the culture, because you think you know the UK from TV or from friends, but you never really know it until you're on the ground. And in addition, we learn in the subcultures. For example, there was a group of travelers. In my class, there was white working class kids, there were black African kids, there were black Caribbean kids, and they all have their uniqueness about them. And one of the things that I've always used in my teaching is I always try to pay attention to each child and try to figure out what makes them tick. And you find out where are the commonalities between the cultures, and you use that. So for example, some of my traveler boys will be missing for months. And they might come back and they might do badly on the initial exam, but he was able to catch up quite quickly because it's a cultural thing for them. Others might not do it so much. I was teaching maths to an immigrant from Africa, a part of East Africa, which was war-torn. And I was the first male maths teacher that he had. And to him, that was a huge deal. I did not realize how much of a role model I had become to some of these boys, especially from a Black Caribbean, Black African background. And to a lesser extent, the white working class boys who were in my first 5 years in the UK. But I didn't have a challenge of such in terms of the pedagogy, because I came from an academic school in Mandeville, the Carteret College. That's where I did my first experience. And when I went to the UK, the only thing is that I had to slow down my teaching a little bit more. I had to learn to differentiate. I had to learn to target a bit more. But because I told someone within the first month when I was in the UK that what I teach in Jamaica in a week, it takes me about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
In the UK, because you have to be targeting the different groups and making sure that everyone makes progress. And then words like progress, as opposed to just attainment, start to come into play in your day-to-day language. Yeah. William?
Yeah. I just want to highlight a point here that my first day experience, my first day's experience was not a reflection of my time at that institution, because I spent 7 lovely years after that. And yes, I believe that the Jamaica has one of the best teacher training program in the world. And for us to be taught for 3 years how to and I think it's 4 years, how to become a good teacher, every single aspect of that training I have used and I have to put into place. And over the years that have been working outside of Jamaica, I used to do it in Jamaica, but then everything I have to put all the little nuts and bolts now together and make sure that it works. In the UK, I had to focus on classroom management, and those skills have to develop, and you have to use different strategies. Yes, the content was always there. Yes, however, there's an area that I did not know about. Yes, when we were doing reading in the content area, I didn't pay much attention to that. Yes, until I went to the UK and there was a PD being offered for EAL students, because then I had a lot of Eastern European country students in my class. And I said, with 6 of these, it's best I go up there. And then I realized that I'm an EAL teacher. Yeah. And that in itself, that professional development is helping me right now in the Middle East, where I am working with students who are actually, their first language is Arabic. And they have to be, and the instructions that we're giving is in English. So yes, all that comes into play. And it is such a beautiful, my thing to the Jamaican government right now is, if anything, do not change, enhance, but do not change anything that you have with the teacher training program. I think it's one of the best in the world. Enhance it, grow, develop on it, and make it even better. But at the moment,
let me come in on that, because when we leave Jamaica, our little rock in the Caribbean Sea, and in fact, when we're in Jamaica, a lot of the talk is that, the system is backwards, or training is not there, and if we go internationally, we are going to be, found wanting. Yeah, and it's like you go, and I want to ask, did you feel in any way in your time of working international, and I'm taking all your experiences here, yeah, and you can feel to go from one part to the other to support your point. Did you ever feel inadequately trained?
Never.
I'll step in there in a second. Not inadequately trained. I think when it came to dealing with special needs, that was a big thing and a big change for me. Because we were not accustomed to having inclusion. That's my word, Miguel. Inclusion. To inclusion, to have students with severe learning disabilities sitting in your class, possibly a child with Tourette's or a child with autism, and they are nonverbal, but they can actually do the work. Now, in Jamaica, we were not taught how to deal with a child who possibly cannot verbalize that he wants to go to the toilet, or that he wants, or he wants to answer the question that you're asking. But they can. And so for me, I had to shift my thinking. I had to totally shift the way I thought about my students who were in my class, who were not necessarily severely disabled, but were somewhere along the spectrum or were dyslexic. And I had to now change how I taught or prepared for that lesson. I mean, I teach the lesson as is, but then I had to prepare for these individual students who would possibly come into my class. I had a student who was blind, and I had to figure out how to teach football to a student who was blind, and it forced me to develop myself professionally. So yes, there were challenges where that was concerned, but other than that, I think more than adequately trained and ready to go.
Yeah, I agree totally, and that's why I say I never felt inadequate. One of the things that I know that as a Jamaican teacher is our ability to adapt, and I had to be very, very adaptable. And you move from one situation to another. Yes, whether it's an EAL, whether it's a student with who is in inclusion, whether it's a student who is in the behavior department that you have to go over there to help them. And it's just about making sure that you reach every single student in your classroom, and to make sure that they have access to the content that you have actually delivered. And that was my thing. I was able to adapt, use what I had learned in Jamaica to do the adjustment, and also the availability of professional development in the countries that I have worked in. So I've worked in the UK. There was professional development available for areas that I felt that I needed to develop the skill further. And while I'm here, I can go anywhere in the world if I see a program there to say to my school, I want to go and develop in this area. But I say I never felt inadequate teaching
Working
after the training that I received.
After the training I received in Jamaica. All right, so there's a lot going on here in terms of our experiences and the different countries that we have worked in and how that's working together. Now, we started off and the conversation seemed to paint a very glowing picture of what happens when you work internationally. And I think even Christy was coming and said, we're not bashing the UK. Now, one of our Facebook users has asked this question. I'm going to put it on the screen. I hope you're seeing the questions and the interaction from the audience. Are you seeing that?
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm not sure if you can see that. So you're seeing some people even getting it all, talking about Michael and CTC. I don't know what we live with that. I don't see anyone talking about.
Let's not go there.
So, but I won't hold that against you guys. So the question that the person asked, and when it comes from Facebook, sometimes I don't get the name of the user, of the person. The question was related to the conversation we were having around international teaching when you work as an expatriate, as against when you work in the UK as perhaps like an immigrant worker. Yeah? Because that term certainly, I only knew of it when I moved internationally. Before that, I was just trying to get into the system. What are the negatives of working in the sense like working in the Middle East? And it's a genuine question that certainly we can unpick as a group.
Okay. The biggest negative would be, for example, you move to the UK, you're making a life there for you and your family. It's a path to citizenship. Once your paperwork is straight, you don't have to worry about anything else. When you move to somewhere like the Middle East, you keep, there are lots of opportunities here, but it is good while it lasts. It is good while it lasts. We won't become citizens here. We're residents, but we will not become citizens. So you always have to have an exit package. You move to somewhere like the UK, you don't necessarily need an exit package. That's the most major negative, the long-term planning that you could have in the UK, somewhere like the UK. You wouldn't be able to have it in one of these Middle Eastern countries based on their immigration laws.
Yeah.
I think, go ahead, William.
As I concur with what Lennox says there. We have to plan for our retirement when we are on the international scene. But I want to look at something slightly different. The leadership within schools. In the UK, there is a lot more structure. The system is wider. It is more. Everybody knows what happens in the system. Whereas when you're on the international scene, it can be a hit and miss as to the management of the institution that you're in. And that at times is maybe our biggest problem in progressing forward in the teaching and learning aspect. Yes, you can, your life is better, can be seem to be better on the surface here, but UK has a system in place, and you know that the schools, they can't do anything with you. They can't say the wrong thing to you. They can't treat you any way differently. That is too obvious. But here you can wake up one morning and your contract changes, especially under the COVID-19. Here you can wake up and they change your contract, and there's nothing you can do about it. You've got to either accept it or decide to move on. Things like that. So there's no stability. I don't want to use the word stability, but you've got to renew your contract every year. So I'm going to use it and say there's no set stability, but it's quite fluid in the region, and that may be a negative if you're someone who plans for the future in years to come. So those are my 2 points.
Yeah, I think I'll take from the perspective of a mother with a child, because I know a lot of people move over here with their kids and are wondering what's education like for your children. I found coming here that it was a bit behind, and so it was as if my son had to start again, was redoing the previous year. It's not necessarily all schools, but having conversation with other teachers, I've found that other teachers in other regions that I've found that yes, you're going to have to make some decisions about your child's education when you get here. So for example, I'm coming from a British system. I'm working in an IB system, and the decision that will have to be made is, am I going to go back at a particular time to make sure my child can go back into either GCSEs and move forward? Do I stay in IB until he goes up to diploma and goes all the way through? Because there's a massive difference in the
programs,
final exam, for example, and where they are along that line. But from the other perspective as well is, if you get into a school that is not into a bad school, yes, where it is owned by people that just want, you're there and they just want you to be working, and they don't look after your accommodation well, because there have been places where your accommodation can be awful. As Fullerton said, the contract can just be pulled out from under you without any notice. That has not been my case, but I know in other people's cases, in other schools, because my school has been really supportive through the COVID-19 and throughout. In times of crisis, some schools do not have a get out plan in case of an emergency. These are things that I have, seen that have happened. Some schools as well, they can shift you without notice from your subject area. So this is something that has happened to many people. They've come across, you might be an English teacher and they might say, look, we need somebody to teach, say, geography for one term. And because, you just need to move along and do it because you don't want to be on the plane by Friday afternoon, really, which has happened, in some schools. So yes, those are the negatives that I have found here.
Here is something a little bit different. It can be a bit of a negative, but another person might just see it as being different. Where I work in a government school, so literally everything that happens in school, a lot of what's happens in school is decided from outside of the school.
Okay.
Yeah. It's decided in the capital. It's decided from outside of the school. There's a lot of control from outside of the school, everything that we do. And sometimes you can have a few surprises. So and then other things that I found as a negative when I first came, now I'm just seeing it as a cultural difference where it could be sports day tomorrow and I'm just finding out when I get to school.
Yes.
Management and planning, yeah.
Sports day, but culturally they give a lot of short notices here.
Yes.
And they can call a holiday tomorrow and so on. But that is cultural, and you can't, when you travel to a country, you have to learn to accommodate the culture. Yeah. Learn the culture, accommodate the culture. It can be frustrating. For example, the most frustrating thing that when I came here is when we're trying to get our paperwork done and trying to get things sorted so we can have our driver's license and we can rent our cars and so on. And you go to some offices and you say, when is the paperwork coming through? They say, inshallah, tomorrow.
Inshallah.
No, inshallah means God willing. And normally when someone says that to you, it means God will give them a nudge at some point for them to do it. They're not in a hurry to do it. But the power comes when you learn to use inshallah back at them. And then you start to feel a part of the system. They say, Mr. Lennox, that document that I asked you for yesterday, do you have it today? I say, inshallah, you get it tomorrow. And they like you for that because you are taking on the culture and you're using it in the context that it should be used. So there are some things that some people will see as negatives. One of the big negatives really is the structure, as William pointed out. The structure in the UK is very structured. You're supported a lot in terms of in school and, for example, with a union. There's no such thing as a union here.
No.
There are elements of collective bargaining, but there's no such thing as a union. So you kind of negotiate on your own, or you might get a group of people who might be able to influence a decision, but no unions. But the support, for example, working in a government schools during the COVID crisis meant that I wasn't really worried about not being laid off because the school might not be able to recoup their school fees from the parents. I had that security that I'm not worried
because you're in
job insecurity. Some people actually lost their jobs.
Yeah.
Wow. And we have heard the horror stories, as William alluded to. I think that's kind of bringing some form of sobriety to the conversation, because sometimes people listen and hear, oh, it's all great to work internationally. But there's a real reality that you're a contract worker and things can change as the situation for your employer change. And so in that sense, you're dependent on hoping, there's that kind of hope that they are also good employees. The other thing that comes out as you start working internationally is the range of schools, the different types of schools. Because technically when you're in Jamaica, you kind of just think that it's government school. Then you go to the UK and you heard about maybe the private schools and the state schools. But in terms of the governance structure, it's not a big deal. Things have changed a lot in the UK now, with the academies really putting a different kind of spin on it. But when you come international, you could be in a school that is government owned. You could be in a school that is parent run, meaning it's all parents, their funding goes to their school fees run the school, and it's parent run board. It could be owned by a person or a company or a group of people doing this to make money. And so all of those dynamics playing this. No, so that's an amazing little piece that to bring into that. No, I want to take it a little bit as we come towards the end of this, because it's I mean, everyone's talking about the presentation, and the feedback is that, you know, people really like what's going on. It's a nice, as I said, this is one person saying, such a balanced presentation, and that's testament to the people here. I think we're just trying to be as fair as we can be about this. Another point someone said is about being adaptable. But my question that I want to put in to bring us to some point is, we are in this time, I want to take it to this, the question of race. Yeah, I want to take it to this, because it would be remiss of me to have this conversation without asking that question about, does race play a role in any of your situations, for example, working in the UK, working here, and to what extent, if any? And it's a genuine question, because you're in Saudi, you're in UAE, you're in Muscat, and that's a whole different experience for people. Go on, Christy.
Okay, I've not had a bad experience being a black person working in the UK or such. I had one incident that I can recall where an older white female teacher was referring to me on one occasion, and she called me boy. And growing up in Jamaica, the term boy had a lot of racial connotations to it from the movie that we would see. So I drew her up on it, and I said, I'm not going to accept that. And she explained herself that the guy that was sitting next to me is also younger than myself, and she also called him boy at the same time. But because of how it sounds coming from a white person at the time, I pulled her up without even realizing that she meant it as a term of endearment. But in the whole time I worked in the UK, working in London kind of gives you a bit of a cushion as opposed to working outside of London. And I was heavily involved with the trade unions. Okay. I sat on the Black and Minority Advisory Board for, at the time, it was the largest teachers union in the UK, the SUWT.
Yeah.
And I helped, I supported a lot of teachers outside of London who had issues because of race. But for me, mostly it has been positive. My accent, my background gave me a lot of behavior management advantages. And a lot of the boys saw me as a role model. I did not have much issue with even the tougher kids, because we could start talking about football or start talking about music, and then we get into the lesson and find ways around it. I did not have issues there. I noticed that a lot of people who had issues, they were working in an area where they might be the only black person in the whole school. And then their experience would have been a lot different from me, who's working in London, which has a rich black history. But that's only my experience.
Yeah, I lived on the fringe, what we call on the fringe, or the outskirts of London, and I lived in Berkshire. And if anyone knows the history of Berkshire and Hampshire, you know that there are not many Jamaicans and blacks at the time when I was there. For example, when there was an influx of Jamaican who attended the school, students refused to go into an English classroom, saying that no one from Jamaica should be able to come to England and teach them English. So that was an interesting scenario there. However, from that incident, the school took a stance, and the borough council, and they supported. Yes, there are certain privileges but it is mainly in an institutionally based in the UK. On the international scene, I don't experience it. I really don't. I see they've got prejudice. There may be prejudices, but not on a racial stage, and that's a difference. The prejudice that you experience in the UK can be from a racial point of view, lack of promotion because of it, and things. You may experience it with the students, and if you don't take a stand, if you take a stand, they will not be a part of it. But if you don't know what to do with it, then it will serve a havoc on you. But I must say that when my children were at school in the UK, they were the only blacks in that school at the time. And the community that I lived in, I was one of the first ones to live in that community. So there were privileges, there were things stacked against us, but not necessarily. I never zoom it in on a racial thing. I can only say to you that it was only until I get to UK that I realized that my skin color was black. Because in Jamaica, the only thing there was, they may call your names, but you're never recognized. It's never blatantly placed in front of you every day that you are a black individual. And I had an experience where it was a black student who I taught after maybe 4 years who made a racial statement to me, and she was unaware of what it was like. And I mean, to have a black person using a racial slur at you're confused because you know that a black person cannot be racist based on the definition of racism. But that's it. I've never had it on the international scene. I've only experienced prejudice, and it's how I dealt with it in the UK. I never dealt with it as a racial prejudice or not highlighting it in the UK. And then you get around it by not doing that, but in some way. But that was my experience, and I've seen people who, for example, there were people who got what you call a work permit, and they had to renew the work permit every single year. Now, I went to the UK and I got a work permit the first time for 2 years. And when it was renewed, I got another work permit that took me over the 5-year span. Yes? So I got everything that I needed. Whereas someone had to get a work permit for their job, working in the same institution every single year. Mm. So if you look into it, you recognize that there are prejudices inside there. Yes, but on the, it's what is being offered. I'm not one who is like to pull that card and say the race card, but life is like that. We've got the different things. It's how we adapt and our training that allows us to move on.
I think for me, 2 things: female and black. Let's look at the UK. I never had a problem with promotion in the UK. I was promoted quite quickly in my second school that I went to. I did not face racism at all. I cannot say I faced any form of racism. However, in the system, I was very concerned about how the black children were being seen and how they were treated in the system versus, children from other races. I found that Black boys often got a really bad rap compared to the white boys who possibly did the same exact thing. There was like a tap on the wrist, while the Black boys, they'll start procedures for exclusion and permanent exclusion and stuff like this. Quite a few of us teachers, however, stood up in our schools and said no, and we took a lot of these children under our wing and started to work with them. I developed a program for children who were seen to who would not make it past grade 8, grade 9. And it was mainly Black girls. And what happened is that we would work on their self-esteem, because too often the students are being told that, oh, well, you're not good enough. You're from Africa, or you're from Jamaica, or some other predominantly Black country. And so they were made to feel as if they were lower than. And it came out in how they put themselves together, etc. So as a teacher, I took the initiative to ensure that, they would not, and I hate saying this, but having to put them in a position where they would not be judged because of the color of their skin. So this was something that I found in the UK, but as a teacher, I have never experienced it myself, because promotion for me was never an issue, and moving up was never an issue. And I've always had a really good rapport with everybody across the school, students and teachers alike. Coming internationally, I have not had an issue either where being Black is concerned. However, as a female, having to talk to boys, you totally notice that, oh, this woman's talking, and they'd continue doing what they were doing. And I realized I had to raise my tone a little bit more than, speaking to the girls. I had to really stand up and say, hey, you need to listen to me. But, as a female I don't know if it's the same for other Middle Eastern countries, but in Saudi Arabia, where it's a patriarchal society, as a woman, your voice is not heard as easily. However, I will add, things are changing massively. We're seeing a lot of more women in the workplace. A lot of the LAs and the teaching assistants here are actual Saudi women who are coming in and are working. So from a female perspective, things are changing. And that respect is growing for the female teacher. However, I'm going to take it away from the race. Your passport in the Middle East plays a major role.
Of course, I love my Jamaican passport.
Let me just put it out there. So I have not had a race issue, but I have seen where your passport that you carry has is major. So somebody with a passport coming here with a passport from Jamaica, a Jamaican passport, you may find that you may be earning less than someone with a British or an American passport. That is what I have seen.
For doing the same job.
Yeah. I agree, Michelle. But it's not only the passport. The passport plays a major role, but
yes.
where you're qualified.
Yes.
affects and where you're recruited from affects your earnings. But I'd like to just touch on another great point that you raised about the institutional racism that may not so much affect us as professionals, but it affects generations of Black kids in the UK. And round about 06 or 05, 06, I was at a school, and I think MP Diane Abbott started the Black Achievement Program, and they started it in my school. And I joined the school after they started the program, and then I heard in assembly that the program was on in a staff meeting. And I said, you can't have a Black Achievement Program and I'm not on it, because I have a vested interest in this community. And and I went on some training, and it added to some of the things that I knew and some of the things that I observed. And what I observed compared to what I learned, what I observed was, if you have two Black boys with similar ability, and one went to school in the US and one went to school in the UK, the boy in the US might end up with a degree for some reason, and the boy in the UK might end up with a skill.
Yes.
And then when I lived in the UK and I started to do some research, I found that there was a lot that was wrong with the system. Some that you pointed out with the way teachers approach Black boys in particular. Black boys were at the bottom, way down in terms of underachievement. So they had a special intervention package for them. And I was working on that. But in order to, you can't just paper over the problem. You have to try to understand the problem. And it goes back to Windrush. You have a lot of really talented kids came over with their parents. And simply because they came from Jamaica, they stuck them in the bottom set. And they gave them very little opportunities. So those students that went through school, they stick them in the bottom set, they stick them in sports. Bottom set, sports. Bottom set, sports.
Yeah.
Quickly exclude them. So those kids became parents, and then they became grandparents. And you have 2, 3, 4 generations of people who had a negative experience in school. Now, why the experience in school is so important, I contrasted that to the Sikhs. The Sikhs, one of the things that they do within that community is that all they talk about at home, because what happens at home affects school. All they talk about at home is university and jobs that you're going to do. While when I had some conversation with some of my kids, they were talking about how they're going to get the council home, because that's the cycle that they're stuck in. So after doing some training and doing some research, we had 3 courses of action. One, we had to train the parents in terms of how to deal with these special boys when they come into school, to de-escalate a lot of problems they get into. Problem 1, boy did not do his homework, turn up at school, start off on the wrong footing. Boy wearing wrong uniform, boy not getting enough sleep at night, and stuff like that. So we had to have some training for the parents to say, make sure your boys are coming to school prepared. And then we had to deal with the teachers, because what was happening was, as the Black boy turns a teenager and his voice starting to change, he can't whisper anymore. So he could be sitting in a group in class and a joke gets cracked, but because his voice is different than the others,
it's a serious thing.
He will be the one. Yeah, he will be the one that sent out. That's problem number 1. Problem number 2, when we talk, we gesticulate. So tall, 6-foot Black boys standing in front of a petite white female teacher, maybe from up north, not accustomed to dealing with Black people. Boy said, Miss, me. He comes across as being aggressive, so he gets excluded. And then we looked at the data and said, the data said the Black boys were being excluded at a higher rate than the white working class boys who were in a similar demographic. And when you look further at the data, a lot of the white working class boys were not being excluded because they weren't turning up at school to begin with. They were truanting. So the Black boy turn up and he gets excluded. So we had to teach these teachers how to deal with behavior from a cultural eye. You have to have this cultural eye at looking at different cultures that these kids are coming from, and to be able to understand and de-escalate situations. And then we try to get parents to support these kids, because without supportive parents, you're fighting an uphill battle. And the parents, they did not trust the school. So the school was trying for months to get the parents in. And then myself and a colleague of mine, some of you might know him, Ian Myton in the UK, we said, if you want to get Black parents in, we do things that, we have a social component. So we just do a little barbecue, invite them in, do some jerk, and we started to talk. And then we get them into a formal session when we said, this is what happens to your son. He comes to school, not wearing the school uniform. Already his day started on the wrong footing. And it just turns from one problem to the other. So what can you do? Ensure that he wears the school uniform. Check that he does the homework. Check that he goes to his bed early enough, because we know that they have to work twice as hard because of how the sitting set. You understand?
Yeah.
And yeah, one more thing, and using the language. When I'm speaking to them, I tend to mix the patois in a lot, because they feel it more, that it connects with them more when I'm speaking to some of the parents. And it made a massive difference.
I just want to say, thank you, Lennox. I just want to say one thing. I'm just going to say one thing. My son started grade 7 and he had a haircut like Lennox. And that was September. And in March, when he got the same haircut, I do that every 6 weeks, take him to the barber. And in March, when he got that same haircut, he and I go to the barber and got the same haircut. I was called in to the school saying that I am somehow mistreating my son based on the haircut that was there. I won't go into what happens after. Yes? But the question I asked the vice principal at the time, what authority do you have on Afro-Caribbean hairstyle? And then if you can answer this, plus the fact that if you look at Sims, you will see the same photograph of the hairstyle that was there. And you didn't call me in September and say, well, my son is being disadvantaged by this. But you believe that that's the case. And I leave it right there. And my son was doing very well. But they wanted something to have a go at.
All right, so
I see a question pop up on screen, Miguel, and just so we don't forget.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a different thing, because guess what, guys?
I think you need another section.
It has been an amazing discussion. I think the feedback from people watching in from YouTube and from Facebook has been an amazing panel, which I certainly won't take credit for the qualities that you bring, but I certainly accept any praise for bringing this amazing group of people together. Yeah. But I think there's so much that we can unpack here. And as you can see, this can go on and on and on. The first thing that I'd like to do is maybe ask if you guys would be happy to come back on other panels and share, as you are now, on other topics. That's the first thing. If that's fine, that's good. We are getting a lot of questions, and many of them we could spend hours upon hours. But I want to make the commitment that we cut this off at some point so people can digest the information and don't have to worry about having to put oxtail or cow foot on fire while watching it. So I want to make sure that they can just cook some fish or something with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thank you. I'm going to leave you with a moment just to share one thought, just for anyone who is thinking about the idea of teaching internationally or teaching abroad, or just grappling with that idea. Any point you'd like to share on that, just so that we can get to the end and close this? Who want to go first?
All right, since I started first, let me finish first. Yes. Knowing the difference between teaching abroad and teaching internationally, one has to first, I first say welcome all Jamaicans to teachers, and I'm not stealing the wealth from Jamaica here, but we have produced some of the best teachers in the world, and we continue to do that.
That's another topic. It's called the brain drain.
No brain drain. That's why I didn't even use it.
Carry on. It's another topic.
I say to everyone, I invite them. I say, apply. on the international scene or teaching abroad. It depends on what you want for your family. If you want to move and have the stability, it's different. However, the passport makes a difference. And I just want to say that having two is even better. Yes? So work on those little things and make sure that as a professional, when you go out, you celebrate Jamaica. Yes? Because even though at times we throw big stones behind us, we need to value what we have learned in those 7 institutions across Jamaica known as teachers' colleges. And I want to say thank you to the panelists and to Dr. Barker for inviting us on this platform. Thank you.
Well, I'll go second. I would say to anyone who wants to come internationally or overseas, take the leap. It has been a wonderful experience for me, and it has taught me so much. I set my goals many, many years ago, and I set my eyes on living internationally. That was something I wanted to do, and I did just that. Coming to the Middle East has been a whole different experience. If you want to come across for saving reasons, if you want to come, I mean, let's be open, because most people do come to the Middle East because they want to save. It is possible. And I mean, you can live a really good life and still save and still be able to do the things you want to do. So I'm going to come from a financial perspective as well. You're also able to put away for retirement. We're at the age where we need to start thinking about that. Retirement is really important. How do you want to live your life when you leave? You know, when you finish all of this, do your research. It's always good to know someone who is in the country. If you don't know someone who's in the country, try and do your research. One nugget I will leave with you is make sure everything you want is in the contract. Do not be led on by, okay, we'll give you this when you get here. If it's not in the contract, it is not given. Okay, so that is my advice. But I would say take the leap, come across. There's so many Jamaicans across the Middle East, as you can see right here. And we are here for you if you need anything. Those of you who are on the Caribbean on Facebook, drop a line, message me anytime, or any one of us, I'm sure, will be willing to answer any questions you have. And make it a wonderful experience. It's amazing, to be honest, especially if you have children as well. It's an amazing experience for them as well. And thank you, Dr. Barker, so much for having me. And, you know, really good to see my 2 friends down here I haven't seen in ages. Really, really lovely to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And Mr. Christie?
Okay. I'm going to just give some general pointers for anyone who's working internationally. Do your research. Learn the culture. In the school that you're going to or the system that you're going into, learn the systems. Learn who is in charge of what and when to do what. Learn how the wheel turns within that system so that you're better able to function there. And in terms of somewhere like the UK or the USA or Canada, somewhere that's unionized, join a union. It has your back. Join a union. I won't tell you which union to join, but I'm very biased on the HWT. I will not tell you which union to join. In terms of incidents of racism, as we're in that bubble, if you suspect that something is going wrong, start a paper trail. It's important. The timeline in emails, it's hard to dispute with. Make people commit things to writing. Start a paper trail, learn the systems, use the systems where you're working, and learn to have some work-life balance. Work-life balance. Like myself, I always try to have work-life balance. That's how I live. You cannot wait to live. You have to always live. And working abroad affords you the opportunities to travel, see other cultures, see other countries, see the world, see that as much as things are different, it's really the same. And yeah, I know we're wrapping up, so I don't want to go in too deep and go any further.
Thank you, Lennox. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, William. I'm sure anyone who has been joining us will find that the words of wisdom, your nuggets of experience, we find those really useful as they consider what they do next in their lives. I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that when we speak about international teaching, it's not only in the Middle East. You can work internationally pretty much in any country in the world. In fact,
in the UK as well.
I found out that even in Jamaica, we had international schools, and I only found that out after I left. Just recently, a new school was opened, Montego International School, Montego Bay International School, and there is always one, the American International School of Kingston. So if you're looking for international jobs, and there was also Hillel. So we do have international schools in Jamaica that serves diplomatic and business interests, you know. So please bear in mind that you could find international schools anywhere in the world. It's not so much that it has to be in the Middle East. It just so happens that at the moment we have people from the Middle East. But over time, the intention is to bring different people. So I want to thank my panelists again for making this program what it was. And I do believe that whatever people learn today, it will be because of what you guys have shared so willingly about what's happening with you. So as we come to the end of the program, I just want to say to anyone that's watching, just bear in mind that this was just a talk about working internationally and the difference between the two, just so that you understand that. So if you've just joined, you can always watch this again, either in the Facebook or on YouTube. You can watch this again to see what our panelists were sharing. And as I said, we're only sharing our perspective. It's not any truth, it's just people's own truth. And so you can learn from this, you can synthesize information from this to help to make whatever decisions you have to make in the future. So just bear that in mind, that these are just people sharing about their personal experiences. So as we come to the end of this, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing and asking your questions. I hope that your questions were adequately responded to, and I hope that some of the questions that you share, hopefully they will be questions that we can use in the future to start another discussion. So thank you very much, and signing out from Global Perspectives. I hope that you did get a global perspective from our Caribbean educators. Thank you for joining. Peace out.